Hi, Marcus the Rath here, and today I'll be demonstrating how to prepare a sword handle for SCA Heavy Fighting. My method uses no power tools. I prefer the use of no power tools because it lets you easily make swords out of vents, hotel parking lots, anywhere that someone may approach you with the need for a sword, or if you've lost, forgot, or broken your only sword, you can use this method at events. And I'll be going through each tool needed and demonstrating how to use them. The tools you'll need are one stick of rattan, at least a 1 1/4 inch diameter, one basket of your choice, one marking device, pencil or Sharpie, one rasp and file, one hammer. I prefer a rubber mallet, but a hammer is what I have available today, one chisel, and one sharp knife. One optional piece that I like to make is a pad for my knuckles. It's very simple, very cheap, and can save you a lot of bloody knuckles. Here's what it looks like when it's installed, and I will just take a few seconds real quick to go over in the beginning how to make this, because if you're going to add it, it needs to be factored into the measuring when you're making your sword handle. To start, you need a piece of camp foam. This can be had for about $7 for 6 feet at Walmart. You take a small roll of electrical tape, circle it, and a full roll of duct tape, circle the inside. Whether you circle the inside or the outside of the electrical tape is not really important. I prefer the inside, as it will tend to stretch if it's too small, but if it's too big, it's a bit floppy. Cut it out with a pair of scissors and use black duct tape, or whatever color your basket is, to tape it so that it looks good at 10 feet. One important thing to note, once you have your two circles, you want to puncture through with the scissors and cut around. You want to avoid cutting to your circle, as that will make it very hard to keep on your handle. In theory, it works. I've done it in an emergency, but it eventually falls off and gets very annoying. And that's it for the optional padding. Now we will discuss selecting your sword, choosing which end will be your handle. So which end of the stave to carve your sword handle comes down to a lot of personal preferences that you're going to develop as you fight for a while and try different things. What I can do here is teach you a little bit about the rattan and why I make the decisions that I do when it comes to carving my sword handle. The first thing you should do is heft the sword at both ends. You're not really looking for the shape of the grip because we'll be changing that. What you're looking for is what feels right based on balance, what looks right based on how you ultimately envision your sword looking when you're done, the curvature of the blade, things like that. Something else important to note are defects. Some defects may make it difficult to carve a handle, such as odd curves. And some defects you can carve out of a handle, so you may actually want to make the defected end your handle in that case. If you're looking for clues on the potential weight of the rattan, so you can't tell which end is heavier, which end is lighter, it's very close. Here's one clue. This ridge here, it may be a little hard to see, but this way is against the grain on this ridge. It stops my forward progression of my finger here. Whereas if I rub this way, it's smooth. So the high side of the ridge is the base of the rattan. That's traditionally going to be the thicker end of the rattan. So it grows this way up. In most pieces of rattan, if you follow the ridge down, your heavier end is going to be the base on that end. I prefer, personal preference, to have the heavier end of my stick to be at the end. And this is a very controversial subject People like different things. This is my own preference. Something else you need to note: curvature. This rattan has been straightened. The scarring here means that this rattan was originally curved this direction. So on this sword, with the blade there, if we impact up here, the sword will have less flex. It will be flexing against that curve, trying to straighten harder, which is good for a few hits. In practice, the first few times we land a shot on a helmet right here, this piece of rattan is going to get a C shape to it. It is going to rebow. So on this piece of rattan, with the straightened edge being this side, I would make the impacting point back here for longevity of the sword, especially if it was a practice sword. You can make it to either side of that, but I would not put the striking edge right here. Once you've selected the striking edge of your sword, holding it just the way you would strike with it if you were chopping, draw a crow's foot or a V pointing downwards at your striking edge, the outside striking edge. Slide your optional padding and your sword basket onto your stave of rattan. Nothing is permanently attached yet. If you have trouble with the next marking step, you can use a small piece of tape to temporarily hold everything into position. So line your striking edge up with the outside of your basket. If you want to go deeper for balance issues, you can. It will shorten the overall length of your sword. I prefer to line up right here. Some baskets may not give you this option as they have end caps. So once that is lined up the way you like, come up here and place marks around the inside of your optional padding or the inside of your basket if you did not use the padding. Come out here and mark both sides of the tongue of the basket. Inside, grip the sword and mark the lowest point of your hand, making sure to keep the basket properly aligned on the sword as you do so. So for our next task, we will need to take our sharp knife and knock off all of these raised ridges here. So if you swing this knife against the grain, and I don't recommend trying this while holding a camera phone, you go all the way around the sword, all the way down, and I will show you the finished product in just a second. But you need to knock these off as level as you can. And what that does is it prevents the raised ridges from cutting our friends, because we're fighting our friends, right? It also prevents the raised edges from gouging and tearing their nice fighting tabards. It also makes the sword look pretty once it's taped. So now that we have the ridges removed and taken care of, we will move down to the end of the sword. What you want to do is these sharp edges on the end, you will take your sharp knife, your rasp, your file, whatever you need, sandpaper, and you will round them off for many of the same reasons that we took the ridges off. They can catch tabards, cut people, and you just don't want that. So after you round that off, it should resemble something similar to this. Rounder is better. It will not affect the overall structural integrity of your sword. Just don't make it a point. For this next step, we'll be using a chisel. And it's much easier than it sounds, but it is sharp, so be sure to always wear your safety goggles and other protective equipment. I've drawn my lines in here so they're easier to see on the camera. I've made them a bit thicker. You do not need to have them that thick. I'll be heading outside for the actual chiseling, and I'll video that, but in here I wanted to show you some basic concepts of using the chisel. I am no woodworker, but I can use this device effectively enough to make a sword. So for starters, you go down to your inside line here. This is going to be the line that you made at the bottom of your padding or the inside of your basket hilt, depending on whether you use the padding or not. So when using the chisel, you see that it has a slope there. If the slope is facing outwards, if I can get a better angle here, if the slope faces outwards, the chisel digs farther into the rattan each time you hit it. So you only want to go into the rattan just enough to take the skin off. After the skin is off, the rasp will cut through this rattan like butter. You can try to kind of shape your sword handle as you go with the chisel. If you feel comfortable doing that, that's fine, that's what I do. But for the most part, just start by taking the skin off of the rattan and using the rasp. It's real easy to take too much if you try to do anything else. So you go in, and once you're through the skin on the rattan, you will turn the chisel over to where it's no longer digging in, straighten it up, and kind of hammer straight down to the line for the bottom of your hand, or just past it. And don't worry if you do not have to go any farther. You can just grab the rattan skin at that point and rip it off or cut it off. Be sure to wear gloves. Alright, so I'm outside now. I've got my chisel, I've got my hammer. Once again, rubber mallet is a better tool for this job, but the hammer will work in a pinch. It will do some damage to the handle of your chisel. So I grab the rattan here, I get it good grip, I place the chisel where I want it. Remember, we're going to the inside line here, should be the center line if you marked everywhere I told you to mark. For digging in, the slope of the chisel is facing out, away from the rattan. That will make it dig. And all you really have to do here is get it started. A sharper angle works to get it started. Once you're through the skin there, rotate the chisel to where the slope is facing out. And it's really quick and easy tap all the way down, almost, to remove the skin. If you go a little deeper, it'll work a little easier for you, but don't go too deep. So you can go all the way around, or you can attempt to go ahead and shape your sword handle. What I do is I identify my blade side, which is going to be the side with the tongue of the basket, or the side that we drew the crow's foot. And I come down on either side of that to kind of make flat edges for my handle. And I'll show you the finished project in just a few minutes, but I will go ahead and record some of this chiseling and edit it into the video. Alright, so I recorded the entire chiseling process. According to the camera, it took about 6 minutes. You now should have a sword handle that is currently looking like this. So, you can still see the mark from the lowest point on our hand. So we peel the skin away to that point. If it peels a little lower, that's fine. We just need to know where it is. So now, always wearing gloves, mind you. I have on my invisible gloves. You can grab the peel and toss it into the backyard, where you tell yourself you'll clean it up later, but you'll still see it next year. Alright, once that's done, we can move on to the rasp. This cuts through the rattan very easily. If you've already got your handle formed, you're going to want to start on the flat side. So do one edge, one side, correct me there, one side, then the other. Do not do the edge yet. As you go, you will want to point towards your striking edge just a little, because you want that grip in your hand to sit in your fingers right here. That would be very uncomfortable to hold. Your flat side goes in your palm, your striking edge goes in your fingers, much like any other handle. You can see that eats it away pretty fast. We're already getting close to a side of a handle on that side. You can see how flat it's getting in relation to the rest of the sword. Do a little bit on each side first until you're sure what you're doing, because you don't want to cut off an inch here and an inch here and then end up with a handle the thickness of your file. So after about 5 or 6 minutes with the rasp, you should have something starting to look like a sword handle. It will line up with your tongue there. You can see the crow's foot pointing in the direction of my cut. And at this point, this is done enough. It is a sword handle. I wouldn't fight with it like this, but it's usable. The next step will be to take your file or sandpaper, and really I don't even think the file matters at this point. You're just taking a piece of steel and getting all the excess off so you can better see what you're doing with your rasp. Now you can see any imperfections, any lumps in your handle, if it's a little offset, and you can go back over with your rasp one more time and correct those. Careful not to take too much off. Alright, once it feels like a good, comfortable grip in your hand, you are finished with your sword handle. Any sanding at that point is up to you. I like a little rougher of a texture. I don't like the sword to start sliding around. And speaking of sliding around, the reason you mark the lowest point on your hand is so your hand doesn't tend to slide down the sword as you swing it into the bottom of your basket. Constantly having to readjust is a problem. The overall design of your sword handle is up to you. I prefer something kind of like a hammer. I like it a little narrower on the front than the back, but that's just me. Some people like round handles, some people like traditional sword-shaped handles. I tend to go with a hammer-like design. When you're through with this part, you can take your sharp knife and cut the edges off these or sand them. Personally, I just hit them with the rasp a little until they're cut down. And then I leave them alone. Alright, so you fit everything back into your sword, you grip it, you make sure the grip is good. There are a few things I want to note about my sword, just so you don't reproduce them. I do not line my basket up perfectly with my striking edge. I cock it a little bit to one side. You don't need to do that, it's a personal preference. This sword handle, you can see that I've carved it specifically to my hand. In the beginning, you may just want to carve a straight handle. I have a notch up here for the fat part of my finger here, and I have a notch here for the fat part of my hand down here. Over here, right at the beginning of this ridge, is where my little finger stops. And you can see all that when I put my hand in the handle. It's all extremely unnecessary, just little things you start to do when you start to make your own swords. So if you watch, especially right here and right here, you will see how this fits my hand. Alright guys, that concludes the section on the actual carving of the sword handle and the selection of the rattan. For the next video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to tape the sword and how to attach the basket. In the meantime, you can gather strapping tape. This is the big roll. It's commonly found. I don't know if anybody really likes the thicker stuff, but it's easy to find. Most big box stores have it. This is the roll of strapping tape you want. The narrower, it's just easier to work with. So you need your strapping tape, either or. You need your contrasting colors of tape. I like gold and black. Silver duct tape's easier to find. Silver and black also works fine. Use any contrasting colors that you like. You're also going to need a bit of string for my technique, for my basket, and some scissors. Not your fabric scissors. Nobody's fabric scissors. In the beginning, keep your sword handle simple, and as you progress in your fighting, you will begin to tailor it more and more to yourself. In the beginning, flat sides, narrower front, narrower back. That's a good place to start. I slowly transitioned into flat sides, slightly narrow back, much narrower front. Just experiment and have fun.